second industry keynote is Shaffiq Jaffer. He is a VP of Technology and Corporate Science at Total. Welcome.
Thank you, Tron.
He'll here to talk to us about
Well,
new priorities in Total, right?
Well, it's not new priorities. Total's story in renewables dates back at least 20 years. We've been in the business of solar for quite a while, initially as a corporate social responsibility, but really turning it into a business. And what I want to talk to you about today is the way we're thinking about Total's long-term challenges is really taking a view of the major societal challenges that face us. How do we turn it into a business? How do we take advantage of it to help society, but also make it a business for us? And the challenge really is, how do we make sure Total is going to be around in 25 years, in 40 years, et cetera? And so I'll talk to you about solar and bio. I could have easily talked about energy efficiency, food. I could have talked about storage. We've invested as one of the Series A investors in Ambri, and that's been a great story. We were an initial R&D partner with Don, so there's a long history here. What I want to point out, let's look at the world population projections. We're sitting at 7.3 billion today. It's going to be 9 billion. In fact, the UN just came out, and I haven't updated, saying that it's actually going to be about 9.5 billion versus where my 9 billion is today, because we live better, we're going to have better health, and it's actually a better projection. If you look at GDP in terms of economic growth, we're talking about 3 to 4% growth worldwide. Of course, everybody wants to have economic returns, have industrialization, have better life. What does that mean? It means that we're going to have to basically increase our energy service to the world by about 50% of where we are today, 40 to 50%, all right? The number I have there is a little conservative. The latest projections are even higher. And when you take that into account, basically that means we got CO2 emissions, because today we primarily rely on fossil fuels. And of course, and as an oil and gas company, I'm happy you do that today, pays my bills, but how do we change that? How do we decarbonize the energy supply? And what's interesting about this graph is that it's not updated. It doesn't have, in fact, China's actual amount of emissions. I don't know if last year you saw the story that China basically had underreported its emissions at the scale of the total emissions of Germany, all right? So this is a major challenge of how do we measure and really know how much we're putting out. I don't have to go through this graph. Don's already talked about this, the world at night. But what I want to point out is really look at the regions that are dark, all right? Sub-Saharan Africa. The next billion people, 1.5 billion population growth is going to come in Africa, all right? They have no light. They have no energy, no basic services. When you look at the numbers, basically access to electricity right now is roughly 1.5 billion. If you look at people relying on biomass for basic cooking, basic energy is 2.7 billion. I was just reading last night a nice talk from Bill Gates, right? Saying that the two things that people need who are poor is time, so they can do something better, and energy. Most people are going out foraging basic biomass to be able to cook with, all right? 70 to 80% of the income of the poorest people is spent on basic sustenance, on food. How are they going to improve if they cannot do that? They don't have the time to do it, and they don't have the money to do it, right? So this is kind of a real opportunity at the bottom of the pyramid for the world. A world under pressure. I wanted to point out water as one example. Food is another. There's many others. 1/3 of the world's population lives with water scarcity, and this is just going to get worse. And if we're going to solve this problem through things like desalination, water technologies, you already heard about startup today, it's going to require energy, all right? Opening a faucet, all right? Basically, we take it as a, what do you call it, as for granted. We're talking about 780 million people do not have access to potable water. 2.6 billion people do not have access to sanitation services, right? Tremendous, tremendous pressure on the need for water. So how we're looking at it in Total is really looking at these kind of scenario plannings, looking at the big picture, long term. And what's interesting to look at here is, okay, we're going to need more energy. But what I want to point out here is look at this kind of top piece that are the renewables today. It's about 1%, the solar, wind, and bio, forget hydro. It's going to grow to 6% of the total energy mix. That means solar is going to grow at least 6 to 7 times in the coming, let's say, 2 decades, right? That's why Total invested. The projection that solar renewables is going to grow heavily. Now, by itself, it's not sufficient. We're going to need things like solar storage, energy storage, all right? But this is a major trend we're seeing, and it's an opportunity for a business. and we took the position of investing in SunPower. How many of you know SunPower? All right, 1.4 billion we invested. We took 66% share of SunPower. It has the world records solar panels. All right, 21.4% efficient at the panel level. All right, the cells themselves are about 24%. This is basically a technology that we focused on having the best technology that allows the highest efficiency output of a solar cell. And if you look at kind of the cost curve of PV modules, how they've changed. Since 1976, basically the price has dropped by 99% for a PV module, right? From $76 per watt to 74 cents per watt, all right? So solar is real, it's there. And when you look at it in terms of price per million of BTU, of the energy supplied, you have this curve of solar basically dropping like a rock, and it's now competitive with LNG, with coal, with other sources of energy, all right? So there's a business here. There's a reason why we invested here, and it's a long strategic play for us. If you look at bio, it's a little further away, all right? Today, we're focused on two things in bio. One is trying to get to sugar, and the other is trying to look at oils and trying to use them as basically a base chemical or a base material to grow from. And from sugar, we can go to things like, in our case, where we've invested in amyris, going to farnesene, Gevo going to isobutanol, Futuro going to lactic acid for replacement of polymers. And you can see the type of materials we're trying to make: biofuels, biojet, lubricants, etc. Total's partnership with amyris is really the first biojet fuel, all right? Trying to fly a plane on electricity and carry 300, 400 people on it, long way away. All right, so we're still going to need chemical fuels. We're still going to need chemical energy because of the high energy density in chemicals. So our focus is on trying to get to how do we get to a biojet fuel, right? How do we get to a jet fuel that can be renewable? And lastly, I want to point out that if you look at kind of our last CEO, Christophe Demargerie, who passed away in 2014 in an accident, unfortunately, he really said, look, CSR, corporate social responsibility, is not our strategy. That's not our goal in solar and bio. Our goal is to make it a business. It's part of our day-to-day operations. And in 2015, in September, we basically re-upped. We said we're going to invest $500 million a year in renewables for the next 10 years. Right? Now, that's a very small sum compared to the total investment in oil and gas, which is $20 billion for Total every year. But that's a pretty significant commitment on the part of an oil and gas company. So with that, happy to chat with you in the networks and answer any questions you have. Thank you.